Plot summary of Bosede Ademilua-Afolayan's Once Upon an Elephant. Once Upon an Elephant by Bosede Ademilua-Afolayan is a riveting play set in an unnamed Yoruba community that tells the story of Ajanaku's rise and fall as a tyrannical king. The 14-scene play intertwines betrayal of public trust, political usurpation, tyranny, familial secrets, and human ritual, culminating in a dramatic climax that challenges the abuses of power. Ademilua-Afolayan's Once Upon an Elephant opens with a controversial plan to crown Ajanaku, the younger son of King Akinjobi, as the new ruler. Serubawon, a manipulative and self-serving figure, orchestrates the plot by bribing his fellow kingmakers to support Ajanaku's ascension. Despite the disapproval of senior members of the Hunters Guild like Adejimi and Odekunle, they argue that Ajanaku's rise defies tradition, as King Akinjobi, though gravely ill, is still alive. However, Serubawon thinks otherwise. He claims King Akinjobi's sickness makes him unfit to rule. Adejimi insists that crowning a new king should involve collective decision-making, not Serubawon's unilateral actions. This sets the tone for the drama in relation to the conflict between loyalty to tradition and the pursuit of power through questionable means. In the following scene, a romantic subplot unfolds between Odekunle, Adejimi's son, and Desola, Serubawon's daughter. The two lovers meet in secret where they express joy at the prospect of formalizing their relationship after the next harvest. However, Desola shares an ominous dream about their marriage. Although she is reassured by Odekunle, the dream foreshadows the tragedy that befalls her later in the play. The two lovebirds also discuss the political conflict between their fathers and the danger it poses to their union. This is followed by the coronation of Ajanaku at the village square in Scene 3. It is a grand event filled with festivities and self-aggrandizing speech by the new king. Ajanaku's rhetoric reveals his arrogance and his disdain for his predecessors. He equates himself with the animal he shares the sobriquet of Ajanaku with, the elephant. He portrays himself as a powerful leader who is destined to crush all opposition. The trampling feet of the elephant on shrubs, little animals, etc., which he compares his crushing power on his opposition to, is in fact definitive of the oppression and tyranny that will become the chaotic mainstays of his usurped throne. While some elders express support, Adejimi criticizes the new king's arrogance and disrespect for his predecessors. In Scene 4, at Adejimi's house, his wife expresses concern over her husband's preoccupation with Ajanaku's selection. She advises him to focus less on the situation, but Adejimi condemns the coronation. He calls it a betrayal of tradition. He is even more disturbed by how the people are not seeing that things are wrong. Iyali explains the rationale behind the people's indifference by alluding to Yagba's proverbial explanation of the situation. In Iyali's words, "How do you want them to see it if it doesn't affect them and make them cry? Our people don't bother much about things that do not threaten their peace. Nobody tells the blind that fire is burning. If he cannot see it, he will feel the heat and smell of the smoke. When fire burns the dog, it will also burn the hunter holding the rope attached to the neck of the dog. That is, if the hunter is foolish enough to hold on to the rope as the dog burns." This statement is made by Iyali in Scene 4 of Once Upon an Elephant. Adejimi dismisses this opinion outright on the basis that the referenced woman is insane, a position Iyali does not share with her husband. In Scene 5, Ajanaku presides over a land dispute in his palace where a man and a woman present conflicting claims. Ajanaku's greed leads him to appropriate the disputed land for himself. He disregards justice and fairness despite the evidence provided. It is unmistaken at this point that Ajanaku's reign has spiraled into tyranny. The scene takes a dramatic turn with the arrival of Yagba, who speaks in riddles. She references, for example in this scene and the subsequent ones, the tale of the elephant that was tricked to his death by the allure of power. And settled by this illusion, Ajanaku orders that he does not want to see her in the palace ever again, a pronouncement he makes in a condescending way. We must not set our royal eyes again on her. However, as we shall find out from this moment onwards, Agba remains a thorn in the king's side till the end of the play. She cements her role as a central figure in the resistance against Ajanaku's corrupt leadership and sets the stage for his eventual downfall. In the following scene, Agba appears again to confront the king. She engages in a heated exchange with the king. Ajanaku boasts about his conquests and demands that Agba address him by his self-styled title, Ajanaku, conqueror of lands and forests, when the latter calls him Ouno, his birth name. But Agba counters with accusations that hints at Ajanaku's illegitimacy. She talks about Ajanaku's complicity in the adulterer tag people have erroneously given to her. She asks Serubawon to tell him who his father is. She does not mince words about Ajanaku being a bastard. Her audacious revelations unsettle Ajanaku and his ally Serubawon, and for the second time in the play Ajanaku orders that Agba be bundled out of the palace. In this scene Agba emerges as a fearless truth-teller in the face of tyranny, especially with how she exposes the questionable paternity of Ajanaku, adding that Serubawon knows who the real father is, and that Ajanaku is doomed to fail regardless of his self-aggrandizement. She also criticizes Almoni, Ajanaku's wife, for leaving Delany, who had worked for her father Ajasa, to pay her bride price. She goes further to question the legitimacy of her pregnancy now that the palace has become a breeding ground for bastards. While her words are disregarded as the rantings of a madwoman, they no doubt unsettle Ajanaku and shake Serubawon. In the end, Agba may be many things, but madness is not one of them. Scene 7 is about the visit of the two representatives of Ouno village to Ajanaku's palace. The village is a neighboring village with kinship ties to Ajanaku's village. The former pays tributes to the latter for protection. The Ouno people have come to Ajanaku to seek protection from invaders who have, in the words of Manai, taken their children away and put their people in bondage. Odekunle tries to make Ajanaku see why they can't afford to turn their back on them, given Ouno's consistent tax payments. But Ajanaku is not buying any of that. He dismisses their plight and insists on immediate payment of inflated tributes as a condition for him to help them in their time of need. When one of the spokesmen, Manai later identified as Gabelyi, protests and criticizes Ajanaku's leadership compared to his father's kindness, Ajanaku, in bid to drive home the point that he is not his father, describes his father's death in dark, outrageous words that reduce his father's legacy to a gory sight. Did you know how he died? I will tell you. First, he lost his voice, then his limb, and finally his eyes. He couldn't move for several moons, confined to a spot like a vegetable, gradually diminishing like salt placed where dew can touch it. After that, he became completely lost to his ailment, decaying and smelling. No herbs could cure him. He lost every sense of time and of ever being a human being. He was simply reduced to nothing. He may have been kind but lonely when it mattered. He was alone and miserable. I am not my father, Ajanaku in Scene 7 of Once Upon an Elephant. Everyone present is surprised by how Ajanaku spoke ill of his father just to prove a point. But Ajanaku does not stop at that. It is not enough that he unrobed his late father of his garment of honor and dignity. He also asks that Manai be stripped naked for challenging his authority. The concerned party, Gabelyi, rather than be subjected to such humiliation, commits suicide instead by stabbing himself with a knife. Ajanaku rises promptly and is ushered in by Serubawon and some elders. This is in congruence with the Yoruba tradition that forbids a king from seeing a dead body. The other kingmakers discuss the recent issue afterwards. Ogundel does what an unrepentant sycophant does with his continued support of the king's actions, while blaming the deceased for his affront. Only Adejimi sees wrong in what the king did, and to an extent Adegbamihu tries to provide an explanation for the man's actions which, according to him, stem from pressure. This is how Ajanaku's cruelty and hostility drives Gabelliu to commit suicide, and his greed and imposition of exorbitant taxes drive the Ouno people to further doom. But Ajanaku's ruthlessness is just unfolding like a multi-layered onion bulb. Themes in Bosede Ademilua-Afolayan's Once Upon an Elephant. Once Upon an Elephant by Bosede Ademilua-Afolayan discusses themes such as power, betrayal, redemption, poetic justice, love, marital infidelity, and oppression and tyranny. These themes are very important to the plot development of the play. Theme of power. Power is one of the dominant themes in Once Upon an Elephant. It manifests through the characters of Serubawon and Ajanako. Serubawon is driven by a desire for power and influence. He seeks to manipulate the succession to the throne by ensuring that Ajanaku, who is secretly his own son, becomes the next king. His actions are rooted in personal ambition and a disregard for tradition and proper protocol. He is willing to lie, betray the king's trust, and engage in deceit to achieve his goals. Power is also exemplified in the character of Ajanako. He is portrayed as a power-hungry individual. Despite not being the rightful heir to the throne, he is determined to seize power by any means necessary. He resorts to bribery to sway the kingmakers in his favor, and ultimately participates in the Ajanako ritual, which involves the rape and sacrifice of virgins. The consequences of this pursuit of power are severe for the two characters. Serubawon takes his own life, unable to bear the weight of his actions and the shame they have brought upon him. Ajanaku's reign is cut short, and he meets a tragic end, unable to achieve the immortality he sought. Theme of betrayal. Betrayal is one of the discernible themes in Once Upon an Elephant. Serubawon betrays his close friend and king, Oba Akinjobi, by engaging in an adulterous affair with Adebisi, the king's wife. Adebisi, on her part, betrays the sacred institution of marriage by having an extramarital affair with Serubawon, which brings about a bastard to royalty who would lay claim to the throne and disrupt the tradition of succession. Were Ajanaku a legitimate son of Oba Akinjobi, he is not the most qualified candidate for the kingship position. The king has other sons like Badern, who is the king's first and eldest son, who are more qualified than him. Ajanaku's ascension to the throne clearly spells usurpation even in this very instance. In other words, there is a tincture of betrayal of the traditional kingship succession in the enthroning of Ajanaku over his supposed and more qualified brothers. Demok, Serubawon's wife, is also caught in the web of betrayal. She betrays Iya Agba by falsely testifying against her. Her false witness culminates in Iya Agba's banishment from the palace, suffering, and humiliation. To cap it all, Ajanaku betrays the kingship throne he sits on through the heinous acts he commits. His actions are a betrayal of the traditional values and customs of the Yoruba society he rules. The rape and sacrifice of virgins, which he indulges in for immortality, betrays the very foundation of the kingship position, which entails making the well-being of the subjects an utmost priority and ensuring the sanctity of life. Theme of redemption. One of the clearest instances of redemption in the play is seen in the character of Desola, the daughter of Serubawon. She is subjected to a horrific ordeal when she is raped by Ajanaku as part of the Ajanako ritual. This act leaves her on the brink of death, both physically and spiritually. However, through the intervention of Iya Agba, Desola is given a chance at redemption and a new lease on life. Iya Agba instructs Desola to embrace Ajanaku to reclaim her life. This act, coupled with Odekunle's actions in neutralizing Ajanaku's powers, allows Desola to be saved and begin the process of healing. Another aspect of redemption can be seen in the relationship between Ouno and Delaney. Ouno is initially forced to marry Ajanako against her will. It is later revealed that she is carrying Delaney's child. Ajanaku's incapacitation allows both Ouno and Delaney to reunite and start a new life together. Besides, Iya Egba is a good demonstration of redemption in the text. She has been slandered and falsely accused of infidelity for years. She has been called all sorts of unprintable names and given the leper treatment. However, with the revelation of Serubawon's adulterous affair and Steen's, Iya Egba's esteem and good image is restored. Theme of poetic justice. Once Upon an Elephant can also be looked at from the angle of poetic justice. The principal characters get what they deserve for their deeds and misdeeds. For instance, when Serubawon initiated the Ijadodo ritual of immortality, he could not have imagined that his own daughter, Desola, will fall victim of the ritual exercise. He does not care about the lives of the other 5 virgins Ajanako has raped and used. He has not the least remorse. But then, the tables turn when a girl he sired falls victim of his evil machinations. While it is tragic, the poetic justice is even sweeter, as Serubawon is eventually given a taste of his own medicine. Iya Egba is vindicated by the revelations of Adebisi's infidelity, Serubawon's conspiracy, and Ajanaku's illegitimacy. It is relieving that she is finally vindicated after so many years of being vilified for the wrong reasons. Serubawon and Ajanako also reap the bitter fruits of their misdeeds. They both share a shameful end. Theme of love. Love is one of the themes in Once Upon an Elephant, though it is not as prominent as some we have discussed so far. It is mostly depicted through the characters of Desola and Odekunle. The romantic relationship between the two is strong. They are both engaged to be married. However, their prospective marriage is stalled by the opposing stances of their fathers in respect to Ajanako's candidacy in the kingship race. The two lovers often meet secretly in the bush. It is there that Ajanako and his guards pounce on them. In his attempt to defend Desola, Odekunle is beaten black and blue by Ajanaku's guards. Odekunle also stands by Desola during her ritual-induced life-threatening illness. This shows how strong and enduring his love for Desola is. Acting upon Iya Egba's instructions, they both see to the end of Ajanako. Their love is a demonstration of the saying that love defies all laws. The theme of love is also manifested in the relationship between Ouno and Delaney. While Ouno is forced to marry Ajanako against her will, she never stops loving Delaney. Their love triumphs over the oppressive force of Ajanako in the end. Ouno is pregnant with Delaney's child when they reunite at the end of Once Upon an Elephant. Theme of infidelity. Infidelity manifests itself primarily through the adulterous relationship between Serubawon and Adebisi, the wife of King Akinjobi. This act of infidelity is not only a violation of the sacred marital bond between Akinjobi and Adebisi but also a betrayal of the trust and loyalty that Serubawon, as the king's medicine man and close friend, should have upheld. Their infidelity has far-reaching implications throughout the play. It results in the conception of Ajanaku, who is falsely believed to be Akinjobi's son. Serubawon's desperate attempt to secure the throne for Ajanaku, his biological son, stems from his need to conceal and protect the truth about their adulterous relationship, and to ensure that he has access to the privileges of the palace. It also has to do with the pride of a father seeing his unworthy son become the king without the blood of royalty running in his veins. Demoke's false testimony against Iya Egba sees her collude with the adulterers to cover up their infidelity. Theme of tyrannical leadership and oppression. Once Upon an Elephant is a searing indictment of tyrannical leadership and the oppression it inflicts. The play lays bare the brutal realities of despotic rule through the character of King Ajanako, whose actions epitomize the excesses and brutality of tyrannical leadership. Let's start with the rationale behind the name Ajanaku, which Prince Ouno goes by. At his coronation ceremony in Scene 3, he notes that the name was given to him by his father King Akinjobi because of his dexterity in swift childish combats with little children of his age. He has understood from a very young age that an Ajanaku elephant tramples the creepers and thorns and bushes and thickets and a whole forest of trees standing in its way. The above reasoning explains his tyrannical and oppressive disposition towards his subjects. This is why he insists on being addressed as Ajanaku. Only Agba refuses to give in to this instruction. With her illustration of a lizard that pretends to be a crocodile, page 36, Ouno lives up to the name Ajanaku that he was given and had enforced on people to call him. He tramples everyone standing in the way of his pursuit of power and immortality, once enthroned. Ajanaku's callous disregard for his subjects' well-being emerges. He denies aid to Ouno, a neighboring village, suffering from invasion solely because they could not meet up with his demand in increase of tribute to him. He makes their payment of tribute the only condition for helping them and does not care about the plight of Ouno people, whether they are taken as captives or not. This cruel indifference reveals the self-serving nature of tyrannical rule, where the ruler's greed takes precedence over the welfare of the people. When Manwan, one of the emissaries of Ouno village, tries to talk back at Ajanaku when all appeals to reason have failed, Ajanaku asks that the man be stripped naked and left under the scorching sun as a lesson. However, Manwan stabs himself before he could be subjected to such humiliation. This again proves the tyranny of Ajanaku's rule. In a chilling display of brutality, he also rapes 6 virgins, including Desola, as part of a ritual to perpetuate his reign. This act illustrates Ajanaku's tyrannical subjugation of his people. He unleashes the guards to beat anyone who stands in his way or dares to question his authority, as we have seen in the case of the thwarted humiliation of Manwan and the severe humiliation of Odekunle. In addition, Ajanaku silences dissenting voices like Agba, who warns him that, despite his looming figure, he is doomed to fail, page 40. He labels her insane in a way characteristic of oppressive regimes when they discredit and marginalize opposition. Besides, in Ajanaku's government, power seems to be concentrated in the hands of a few individuals, specifically Ajanaku and Serubawon. This concentration of power and the lack of checks and balances create an environment conducive to the abuse of authority and the suppression of dissenting voices. Characters in Bosede Ademilua-Afolayan's Once Upon an Elephant. The characters in Once Upon an Elephant include Ajanaku, Serubawon, Agba, Desola, Adejimi, Demok, Omorni, and Odekunle. Once Upon an Elephant by Bosede Ademilua-Afolayan tells the story of how Ouno, the bastard son of Akinjobi, is single-handedly enthroned by Serubawon as the king of an unnamed Yoruba village, against the dictates and the recommendations of his fellow kingmakers. Serubawon seeks to fashion Ouno, who has come to address himself as the mighty Ajanaku elephant, into a very powerful man whom he can direct as he deems fit, through Ijadodo rites which require the blood of virgins. Like the proverbial elephant in a Yoruba tale, Ouno's thirst for power will soon bring about his downfall. But that is not what this post is about. In this post, we are going to talk about the characters in Bosede Ademilua-Afolayan's Once Upon an Elephant. The characters in Once Upon an Elephant include Ajanaku, Serubawon, Agba, Desola, Adejimi, Demok, Omorni, and Odekunle. We are going to identify some of these characters and the roles they play in Once Upon an Elephant. Ajanaku, also known as Ouno. is King Akinjobi's successor. He is the central character in Once Upon an Elephant. He is portrayed as a despicable, power-hungry villain who will stop at nothing in his ruthless pursuit of becoming king and attaining immortality. He resorts to bribery, intimidation, and violence to achieve his goals. He tries to bribe the kingmakers Adejimi, Odekunle, and Odekunle with gifts to get them to support him becoming king. Though only Odekunle accepts them, Ajanaku equally threatens Delany's life when he stands in the way of Ajanaku taking Omoni as his wife against her will. Ajanaku rapes multiple virgins as part of the abhorrent Ijadodo ritual for immortality. The blood of the virgins is fed to demons who keep Ajanaku alive while the virgins die a slow death. Desola, the daughter of Serubawon, is his last needed virgin victim for the ritual. He also beats up Odekunle, Desola's fiancé, in this ritual rape process. He shows no remorse for these heinous acts of sexual violence. The truth is revealed later in the play that Ajanaku is not the biological son of the former king, but rather the product of an adulterous affair between Serubawon and Adebisi. This means Desola, the girl he rapes, is his half-sister. At the end of the play, Ajanaku meets his fatal end as Egba breaks the blood connection between Ajanaku and an ailing Desola. Odekunle is instructed to wrap a charmed red cloth around Ajanaku's neck. This act restores Desola to good health while Ajanaku is incapacitated. Serubawon. Serubawon is one of the important characters in Once Upon an Elephant. He is the king's medicine man priest and the leader of the kingmakers. He is also a close friend of King Akinjobi. He is portrayed as a deceitful, hypocritical character who is driven by selfish ambition and a willingness to employ deceit and unethical means to achieve his goals. He betrays King Akinjobi by having an adulterous affair with Adebisi, one of King Akinjobi's younger wives, which results in the birth of Ajanaku. When caught by Egba, instead of owning up to his transgressions, Serubawon maliciously lies and slanders Egba, destroying her respected position in the palace through false accusations of infidelity. Serubawon is portrayed as obsessed with power. This is why he seeks to make his illegitimate son Ajanaku the new king before and after Akinjobi's death, even though Ajanaku is not the rightful heir, in order to maintain his own access to the palace. Thus, he forcefully installs Ajanaku as the king without the consent of the other kingmakers. Serubawon performs the abhorrent Ijadodo ritual for Ajanaku, which involves raping 6 virgins to make Ajanaku immortal. Tragically, one of the virgins Ajanaku rapes as part of the ritual is Serubawon's own daughter Desola. At the end of Once Upon an Elephant, when the truth about his affair with Adebisi and Ajanaku's illegitimacy is revealed, Serubawon hangs himself out of shame and guilt. He is thus depicted as a deplorable character who sacrificed integrity, loyalty, and ethics in his ravenous pursuit of power and immortality for himself and his illegitimate son. Egba is the first and most senior wife of Oba Akinjobi, the former king. She is addressed by several names in the play: Egba, Fatik, Mad Woman, but her real name is Omofatik Aduni. She is one character that helped expose the web of deception surrounding Ajanaku's illegitimate claim to the kingship. Egba is a victim of lies and deceit. Serubawon and Adebisi falsely accuse her of infidelity, fearing that she would expose their affair to the king. She is consequently thrown out of the palace by Oba Akinjobi, treated like an outcast in the village, and called a mad woman by the villagers. While villainized and outcast for years, she does not back down from her convictions. She bides her time, holding on to the truth about Ajanaku's paternity. At the climactic Jobel festival, Egba dramatically reemerges to expose Serubawon and Ajanaku's misdeeds. She reveals through a powerful monologue how Serubawon and Adebisi had betrayed the king, conceived Ajanaku through their affair and lied to cover it up by slandering her. She is also instrumental in Ajanaku's downfall and Desola's healing. She instructs Desola to embrace Ajanaku to reclaim her life after he had raped her for the ritual. She also guides Odekunle to wrap a charmed red cloth around Ajanaku's neck, which strips him of his ill-gotten powers from the ritual. Desola. Desola is the daughter of Serubawon and Demoke. She is in a romantic relationship with Odekunle, with whom she is preparing for their wedding. She is unfortunately raped by Ajanako as the last virgin needed to complete the requirements for the depraved Ijadodo ritual. After being raped, she begins to die slowly as the dark ritual takes effect on her. An ailing Desola on the brink of death is brought back to good health at the Jobel festival, where she is instructed to embrace Ajanako to neutralize the ritual's hold over her life. Adejimi. Adejimi is a member of the Hunters Guild, a group responsible for the selection of a new king according to tradition. Along with Adegbami, Adejimi disagrees with Serubawon's attempt to install Ajanako as the king of the village without following proper procedures. He also refuses to accept the bribe gifts that Ajanako offers to sway the kingmaker's decision. His son, Odekunle, is the fiancé of Desola, who is beaten by Ajanaku's guards in the bush when she is abducted to be raped for the ritual. Odekunle Demoke. Demoke is the wife of Serubawon and the mother of Desola. She is complicit in the slandering of Iagbo. She falsely testifies against Iagbo. Her false witness against Iagbo leads to the woman's banishment from the palace. Omoini. Omoini is truly in love with Delany, who had served her father Ajasa in order to be able to marry her. However, she ends up being taken as a wife by Ajanako against her wishes. She becomes pregnant, and it is revealed that the pregnancy she is carrying belongs to Delany, not Ajanako, her husband. She reunites with Delany at the end of the play. Odekunle. Odekunle is the fiancé of Desola and the only son of Adejimi and Iyali. He is beaten by Ajanako's men in the bush when Ajanako tries to rape Desola, acting on Iagbo's instruction. He wraps a charmed red cloth around Ajanaku's neck, which restores Desola from the brink of death, and culminates in Ajanaku's incapacitation. Other characters in Once Upon an Elephant by Bosede Ademilua-Afolayan include the following: Iyali. She is Adejimi's wife and Odekunle's mother. Unlike the other villagers, she is friendly to Iagbo. She interacts with her and confides in her. She is the one that brought the issue of Desola's failing health to Iagbo. Delany, he is Omoini's lover. He is threatened by Ajanako, who snatches Omoini from him. It is discovered later in the play that he is responsible for Omoini's pregnancy. Adegbami. He is another member of the Hunters Guild, opposed to Serubawon's plot to make Ajanako the king. Odekunle. He is a member of the Hunters Guild who accepts gifts, bribes from Ajanako to further his cause to become the king. Akinjobi. He is the king before Ajanaku's reign, who is sick and eventually dies in the play. We do not encounter him in the play, but much is said about his prolonged illness, which temporarily stunts the ambition of Ajanako to be enthroned as the king. He is betrayed and lied to by those closest to him, Serubawon and Adebisi. Adebisi. She is the younger wife of Akinjobi and the mother of Ajanako. Like Akinjobi, Adebisi is only mentioned in the dialogues of the characters in the play. She is said to have involved in a sexual relationship with Serubawon behind the king's back, which results in the birth of Ouno, who will come to identify himself as Ajanako. She conspires with Serubawon to falsely accuse and slander Iagbo of infidelity to deflect from her own transgressions. Her affair with Serubawon is the original sin that precipitates the entire chain of events. Betrayals and the illegitimate attempt to make Ajanako king. Dramatic techniques in Bosede Ademilua-Afolayan. As Once Upon an Elephant. Some of discernible dramatic techniques in Once Upon an Elephant are folklore, foreshadowing, chorus, symbolism, and suspense. In this video, I am going to identify and copiously discuss the dramatic techniques used by Bosede Ademilua-Afolayan in Once Upon an Elephant. Some of the discernible dramatic techniques in Once Upon an Elephant, which we shall discuss here, are proverbial use of language, folklore, foreshadowing, chorus, symbolism, and suspense. Folklore. Once Upon an Elephant predicates on a Yoruba folklore where an elephant is gone by the tortoise to his death in his pursuit of power. The play relates to this folklore in more ways than one. 1. The refrain from this folklore is sung severally in the play. 2. It can be argued that Serubawon and Ajanako are the proverbial tortoise and elephant respectively. Like the tortoise, Serubawon eggs Ajanako on in his pursuit of power and immortality, till he comes to his imminent end. To cap it all, the title of the play, Once Upon an Elephant, alludes first to the elephant in the folklore, and then to the tragic tale of dictators like Ajanaku whose inordinate quest for power undid them. The folkloric song is primarily raised back Agba's derisive dialogue with Ajanako, to tell him a tragic fate, similar to the elephant that was tricked by tortoise with the allure of power to his death, awaits him. The song, which adds to the musical richness of the play said already by the watered-down translation of Yoruba proverbs, comes across as Erin Karilo wa Jeoba, Erin Yi. The singers in the background pick up the song every time Agba sings it, as an allegorical reminder to King Ouno how the great Ajanako elephant came crashing down from the adorned royal throne of deception to the concealed pit of death. Foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is a literary technique used to predict an event that will happen in the future. Within the context of Bosede Ademilua-Afolayan's Once Upon an Elephant, foreshadowing is evident in Agba's foretelling of Ajanaku's doom. She is very certain that the power-hungry king will soon meet his downfall. While it can be argued that her position and prediction might have come from a place of her knowledge of Ajanaku's illegitimacy and the shared experience of what becomes of tyrants, there is no gainsaying that Agba foreshadows the downfall of Ajanaku, and it comes to pass. Chorus. Chorus is a group of actors who comment by speaking or singing in unison on the action in a play. The playwright uses chorus as a literary device, especially in the rendition of songs. In the actual staging of the play, the singers in the background take up Agba's derisive use of Erin Karila or Jeoba song. Agba initiates the song during her dialogues with Ajanako purposely to taunt him and remind him of the tragic fate that befell the real Ajanaku after whom he took his name. Symbolism. Symbolism is the use of objects, people, situations, or actions to represent other meanings, ideas, or themes. It manifests in a number of ways in the play. It is important to begin with the use of names in the play. There are 3 names that readily come to mind: Ouno, Ajanako, and Serubawon. The name Ouno means wealth has flaws, used to indicate the imperfections of a prosperous home. The underlying issues in King Akinjobi's polygamous family, most of which are revealed towards the end of the play, typify the semantic import of this name. Despite being a successful polygamist with a good reputation among his people and holding the most coveted position in the land, he is betrayed by his wife Adebisi and his trusted subject Serubawon, who have an affair. Together, he also fathers a bastard in Prince Ouno. He is tricked by the same set of people into a web of conspiracy that leads to the banishment of his other wife, Agba, from the palace. These situations instantiate the semantic import of Ouno, that even prosperous homes have their imperfections and challenges. What Ajanaku represents in the play is very integral. It is the name Prince Ouno adopts to give himself a looming larger-than-life portrait. Ajanako is an honorific term Yoruba people use for Iran. The elephant, Ouno's adoption of this name is predicated on the trampling effect of the elephant. An elephant tramples creepers, and thorns, and bushes, and thickets, and a whole forest of trees standing in its way. The name Ajanako is thus indicative of the tyrannic power of the elephant, which King Ajanako as the name-bearer brings to life in his relations with his subjects in the play. Serubawon as a name visualizes someone who imprints fear in people's minds. The name-bearer putting into perspective the plague he'd brought to life and thrown with his affair with Adebisi, represents calamity-inspired fear on both personal and communal levels. He destroys Iya Agba's life, installs Ouno as king and sets him on rampage, and brings calamity to his own very suspense. Suspense is a literary device that creates an uneasy feeling of anticipation in the reader by withholding or releasing information in a way that raises questions and builds excitement. Bosede Ademilua-Afolayan uses suspense in her handling of Ajanaku's paternity. When Iya Agba first raises the issue of Ajanaku's illegitimacy, one thing that readily comes to mind is Ogundal's concern about Ajanako's illegitimate claim to the throne. What about those who came before him? What about his brothers and his seniors? What happens to the process? We think of a usurper who is positioned to take unmeritedly what his older brothers should naturally be considered for. But then, in Scene 6, when Iya Agba insinuates that Serubawon is the father of Ajanako, the readers get a different understanding of what she meant by Ajanaku's illegitimacy. This hint gets the readers hooked till the end of the play. It gives space for anxiety about Ajanaku's paternity until Scene 13 when Iya Agba finally lets the cat out of the bag.